Welcome to another episode of our channel. In this video, we will talk about the terrible conflict in Sudan and how Islamic forces are persecuting Christians and other minorities in a genuine act of genocide and ethnic cleansing. Sudan, located south of Egypt, a vast country with a predominantly Muslim population, is going through a terrible moment of territorial and humanitarian disintegration. The current conflict began in April 2023 after a violent clash between the Sudanese army and the powerful RSF paramilitary militia led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Remediti. The origin of the conflict traces back to the fall of Omar al-Bashir's regime, who had ruled the country for almost 3 decades. After the popular revolt that deposed him and led him to prison, the country attempted to adopt a civilian government model, but this resulted in more instability and eventually a new military coup in 2021. A coup orchestrated by the two central figures of the war, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, commander of the armed forces and recognized as the president of Sudan, and his former ally, Remediti, who commands the RSF rebels. The division between them began soon after the 2021 coup, as Remediti feared losing his power, opposed al-Burhan's proposal to absorb RSF fighters into the Sudanese armed forces. However, spiraling out of control and escalating into war in April 2023, the RSF has roots in the dreaded Janjaweed militias, which committed terrible atrocities in Darfur in the 2000s. They were accused of genocide against non-Arab populations, especially local tribal populations. Since then, Remediti has built a massive military force, with interventions in Yemen and Libya, controlling large gold mines in Sudan, ensuring sufficient revenue to further fuel his war machine. Recently, the RSF has taken control of almost the entire Darfur region and neighboring areas of Kordofan, now culminating, at the end of October 2025, in the capture of El Fasher, the last major city controlled by the government in western Sudan. The RSF, now without military adversaries in the region, begins to impose its absolute rule and intensify its persecution against non-Arab groups. The humanitarian crisis in Darfur has dramatically intensified with accusations of genocide, with the rebels and their allies accused of systematically attacking civilians from specific ethnicities, mainly the Massacre and other non-Arab communities, such as Christians who make up about 3% of the population. In March 2024, Human Rights Watch warned of the possibility of genocide in Darfur, and in January 2025, the United States government officially recognized that the RSF and its allies are committing genocide, accusing them of mass murder and systematic sexual attacks against women and girls of specific ethnicities. The situation in Darfur and other regions of Sudan is alarming, with more than 150,000 people losing their lives since the beginning of this conflict, and around 12 million civilians forced to leave their homes. Experts consider this crisis as the largest humanitarian emergency in the world currently. Peace attempts, including rounds of negotiations in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, have repeatedly failed with little international pressure to impose a solution. The central accusation against the RSF rebels is that they are committing genocide against non-Arab populations of Darfur. The ethnic nature of the assaults, such as the extermination of individuals of certain ethnicities or religions, has led international organizations to assert that there are clear elements of a genocidal campaign. And within this scenario, minority groups like Christians have also been targets of violent and systematic persecution. Despite Christians representing a small portion of the Sudanese population, their situation has deteriorated with the escalating conflict. In a predominantly Muslim country, Sudan has always been a place of religious tensions, but in recent years, with the worsening war and the strengthening of paramilitary groups like the RSF, religious minorities are facing a new and even more terrible degree of intolerance. Christians, especially those in the northern and western regions, have been victims of direct attacks, murders, and forced displacements, with the fear of religious persecution leading many Christian families to flee to refugee camps or even cross borders to neighboring countries in search of asylum. Violence against these groups includes not only military attacks, but also persecutions motivated by religious hatred, with many Christians being pursued and killed in their homes or while fleeing from attacks, especially by militias allied with the RSF rebels. Attacks on churches, specifically targeting the destruction of Christian symbols, are also very frequent in the country. Although the persecution of Christians is not the only motivation behind the atrocities in Darfur, it is part of a broader strategy to dismantle non-Islamic communities, forcing ethnic and religious homogenization of the whole region. The goal of these brutal actions is clear: to eliminate any and all non-Islamic presence in Sudan, including Christians, of course. Furthermore, the scarcity of food and resources in Darfur areas has further increased the vulnerability of Christians, who are often marginalized in humanitarian aid operations, receiving less than other ethnic groups. Distribution of food and medicine, which was already limited due to the siege and blockades imposed by rebel forces, not reaching equitably, with many Christian communities being left behind. With the near-total control of the RSF over Darfur and other key regions, Sudan is nearing an irreversible division. The struggle for control between the army and the rebels is putting the country on the brink of an even more prolonged and devastating war. The international community faces a dilemma: how to intervene effectively without further aggravating the situation. With Sudan, an already weakened and impoverished nation, now at its most critical moment since its independence, the remaining question is, does Sudan have any chance of reuniting as a nation, or are we witnessing the end of one of Africa's largest countries? And what will happen to the Christians and other Sudanese minorities left to their fate at the hands of Islamic rebels? And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates.